Kai ngā mana, kai ngā reo, e aku rangatira tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou ke runga ki tēnei āhua o te uruta, e noho nei ke rungi a tātou. Aha ko te motuhake e noho nei ai a tātou, tēnei te mihi. Me ki rā kia tau mai te oranga, te manaakitanga o te atua kei rungi o koutou katoa. No rere e te tiamana, o ngā tiamana tokorua nei, tēnā kōrua me ki rā ngā kai kauni hera, tēnā koutou. Kei ngā rangatira a tēnā o ngā PSGs, tēnā koutou me ki rā te kotahi tangota o te ahu o tēnei komiti o tātou. E tika ana kia mihi ki ngā mate e hinga nei, aha ko i tēnei āhuatanga e uhia nei rā i a tātou, no reira koutou rā ngā mate hoki haere atura. Tēnei te whakaro aka ki a Des, ki a rātou ma. No reira koutou rā ngā mate haere. Haere ki te putahi nui o rehua te pōtūtanga tō pipiri te takatūrunga te moenga te whakaarahia. Koutou ki a koutou hoki mai rā ki a tātou te honga ora. Ahoy anō tēnā tātou. Just a karakia, and the karakia that I'd like to do, because it's such a fantastic day down here in Pōneke, in Wellington, is whakataka te hau. It's whakataka te hau. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kiuta, kia mā taratara kitai. E hi a ki ana te ata kura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora, kia ora tātou, tuku ki a koe rā e te tiamana e John Naylor.
Ka pai.
Morena, everybody. I hope you're all doing well in your bubbles. We'll try and keep a tight schedule as we can, because I know a lot of us have got children and that at home, and it's a bit hard for the parents on here to try and manage that as well as stay in our meetings. So, kia ora everybody. First up, I've got one apology, I think, and that's from Tanya Hotman. If she's well enough to join, she will. If she doesn't, her apologies have been tendered. So if we could just have somebody have any other apologies.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I don't see Neil on the line, and I don't see Peter Paku.
I was just going to ring Peter Paku and see if he even knows.
Also, Mike Mohi.
Right. I don't know whether Mike can get internet at where he is.
So does that impact on the quorum?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
We still have 14 members.
We have 14 present?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just give Peter a ring. I'll just step out and... No, I don't even... I'll just give him a ring. Put it on mute.
Is Corona Nikki on?
Yes.
Oh, kia ora,
Yep.
Corona.
Morena.
Nikki?
Chair.
Kia ora, Pete.
Atamari, just indicating that I may need to leave the meeting for half an hour at some period. I can't give you a specific time. I've got two meetings running parallel, and I'll need to do a presentation at some stage to the other meeting. I can leave and return. I'll notify.
Kia ora. Has anyone else got any short leave apologies they want to put in at this point? No. Okay. Just waiting on any further apologies. I think. Anna Lee, were you saying that? We might have to...
Geez, sorry. Can I just check the quorum quickly again?
Yeah. I think so, but I don't look like we've got a quorum.
Just give me one moment. Do we have Charles Lambert online?
Not that I can see.
No, so have we got Nikki, and is that actually Robin Harpy or somebody standing in for Robin? Robin standing in for somebody else?
No, James, I think it's just joining for the presentation.
There's Robin.
Right, so Robin's not part of the quorum.
2,
Peter Paku tenders his apologies.
6.
So, who? Well, there's Nikki. I think we're 13. Oh, there's Neil. Neil's just joining us.
Yep, then we're good to go.
Right.
Okay.
In the lead, does that put us at the minimum number required for quorum?
Correct, yes.
Okay, I'll furnish my apologies to my PSG for my attendance there.
Thank you. Continue, Madam Chair.
Kia ora everybody on so I just wanted to see if there were any further apologies apart from
Peter Paku, please.
Noted, thank you.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so moving on, I'm just gonna, if any of you's downloaded the run sheet for today's meeting, you'll see the items and the time that's been allowed for those particular items. So as we go, we'll probably find that we won't use all that time, or we may use all that time depending. So without further ado, I'll go on to item number 2, which is any conflicts of interest to be declared.
Madam Chair, I have a conflict of interest.
Kia ora, Tanya.
Kia ora. I have a conflict of interest to declare as a trustee of Mahaka Sea Trust and a submitter of the plan change, outstanding water bodies and the tank. I do want to make a comment. Mahaka Sea Trust supports the submissions of whānau, hapu and iwi members. Our stance remains to stop any sort of orders being placed over our awa, especially Mahaka sea lands area, and to preserve our tino rangatiratanga on behalf of our people, which is ours by ancestral birthright. We occupy the lands, embracing the length of the original name being Ngā Naru o Ngā Upokororo mai I moko tua raro ki rangatira, from Kuripapango all the way to the headlands next to Kaimanawa Ranges. The plan change system will add layers of bureaucracy that may in fact hinder and restrict our abilities and authorities to protect the upper end of the Ngaruroro. We support a Māori resourced and staff to prevent our mana whenua taonga and Te Tiriti o Waitangi obligations from being destroyed and damaged through greed and over-exploitation. We encourage the council to engage us as a partnership level to maintain an effective management plan for the sustainability of our awa as partners. That's all I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Kia ora, Tanya.
And the Settlement Trust potentially will join the appeal with Ngāti Kahungunu in relation to the outstanding water bodies. Potentially, I'm not clear about that, so I'm just noting it in case.
Kia ora, James.
Chair, look, I'm sorry to raise this, but I think we are actually only at 13 in relation to the quorum, so a bit of double counting around Apiata with his fireflies link in there too. So look, I suggest we proceed with the meeting, but recognise that any decisions that need to be taken would need to be ratified at a later point and could only be informal resolutions of council today unless somebody joins us. That's my suggestion. Otherwise, we would have to abandon the meeting.
James, can I just add on here that Mike Moe is struggling to connect, so we're just trying to sort out a telephone number for him to dial in, and Charles would join in for a little bit.
Thank you. Well, that would suggest that we box on and hopefully we have quorum once we get to any decisions.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. That'd be a great idea. We'll just box on until we can get to 2 more members on, especially around the decision-making area in those items. So if we just go to we can't do the confirmation of minutes either because we don't have a quorum. but we can go to the follow-ups from previous meetings, which I think is item 3 or item 4.
Madam Chair, I was unaware I was recording. Thank you for that, James. Annalee, are you able to stop that at all? I'm searching here and I can't stop the recording from my end.
Just to clarify, Annalee, that's the Fireflies one that's on there. If that could be removed, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chair,
Sorry,
with-
Madam Chair.
Yeah, with respect to the follow-ups from the previous item, can I just suggest that we take this as read and happy to take any questions in relation to any of the items anybody has?
Madam Chair, in regards to the, hold on, you said, sorry, I've got 4 or 5 different papers. Okay, the minutes. Can I just follow up on the hearings committee? I'm just following up on the progress of the hearings committee and RPC, and if in fact you are serious about more tangata whenua being given the opportunity to sit on the hearings panel. And bearing in mind, Ngāti Pāhowera Development Trust, I emailed to everyone to say receive funding from the Regional Council to train more of our people to become qualified RMA commissioners. In regards with conflicts of interest between mana whenua and managing the conflict of interest, this is our whenua and taonga. Conflicts can be declared and managed unless there is a direct financial connection or gain associated with the potential commissioner, then they can be excluded. So I want to follow up on that, Madam Chair.
Kia ora, Tania. If you go to, I think it's page 5 of the follow-up item, there was a discussion on the Hearings Committee sought advice and guidance from tangata whenua on wording for the terms of reference around mana whenua hearing commissioners. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
And it says that legal advice has been sought from legal counsel on this path, and the draft terms of reference will be provided to the Hearings Committee and Regional Planning Committee following that advice. I think it would be more about following up on if the legal advice has been already sought, and if not, when will that happen? Is that you, James? I think it had.
Oh, look, I'll defer to Pierre or Katrina on this. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. So the status comment as it reads there is still my understanding. I'd need to defer to Katrina to see if there's any update to that.
Morning, everybody. No, there is no update. We are still seeking legal advice on those conflicts of interest scenarios.
Tania?
In that case, Madam Chair, can I ask who the legal advice you're seeking from?
Does it matter?
It matters because I've sent an email out to everybody, haven't had a response, and I'm assuming that should be suffice.
So Council's legal counsel is Simpson Grayson, for which we have gone to. Sorry, I'm not sure which email you haven't had a response to. And
Madam Chair, I might be able to assist.
Martin.
Yeah, Morena koutou, Morena Tanya. Look, to answer your question, yes, from my perspective, the Hearings Committee is deadly serious about increasing opportunities for mana whenua participation in RMA decision making, which is precisely why we sought the advice of this committee. And I know that you have, through an email, contributed to that kōrero, and informed by that, we are seeking advice to ensure that the position adopted is robust not open to challenge and enduring. So the advice needs to come from this committee. And I think once we've received the legal advice, we can conclude that conversation and make a recommendation. But at the moment, that's still a live discussion. There are no imminent hearings that we don't have a hearings committee appointed to or for. So I do think we've got time to get this right.
Mhm.
Well done, Martin. Any other further questions? No. Okay, moving on, we'll call for minor items not on the agenda. If there are any.
Sorry, Madam Chair, me again. Minor items. Can we get an update on the Māori constituencies?
Chair, that's not a minor item.
No, because we're not
We've had the discussions. Someone may want to update us on it, but it's not the purpose nor minor items.
Agree.
Now, I believe the document has been circulated for consultation. Yes, in fact, I know it has. The council's document is there. I can send you an email, forward the email to you, Tanya.
Okay. Thank you. Has anyone got any other minor items for the agenda? No. No minor items. Moving on. So, have we got any others that have joined our meeting yet, Annalee, to make a quorum?
Not yet, Madam Chair. We're still trying to sort out Mike Mohi. Sorry for that.
Okay, I'm suggesting, is Robin Happy here doing the update on the verbal update on the Mahaka plan change? Robin?
Okay,
Sorry?
No, I'm
Are
not
you doing the
I'm,
update on the Mahaka plan change, Robin?
Bonnie and Dwayne are going to dial in on that one. I'm just listening in to see what they're going to say.
All right, okay. Because I'm just at the two items for decision making, which is 6 and 7. And without our quorum, we can't do both those items. We can have a discussion on them, but we can't pass any resolution to them. So perhaps if you like, we can have a discussion on them, but no resolution. How's that?
Can I suggest, Joynella, that we do take, as you've already indicated, do the verbal update on the Mahaka plan change. Who was to lead that?
Bonnie. Bonnie Hartman.
Kerry?
Madam,
Kerry can lead us on that.
Kerry.
Deal with that.
No, sorry, I was just actually going to interject. We've actually got Kate Mcarthur dialing in at 10:55 when she's scheduled to speak. She's going to be presenting to you all for about 30 minutes. So I wouldn't be able to put her first without giving her forewarning.
Okay. Is there anything else we can do down the agenda? Initial draft on the regional issues?
We could do some of the verbal updates on central government.
Yeah.
Statutory advocacy in those ones, if you like. So if we move to item 10, I think it is, the update, policy projects update. Yeah, who's doing that?
I can do that. Just bear with me. I'm just scrolling through my paper.
Can you do that, Kieran?
Of course.
Lovely.
Right, so we've had quite a bit of activity in this paper since we previously spoke to it. Belinda will be talking to you about the outstanding water bodies today, and that is a decision item, but there's an update there, and we've highlighted in blue where there's been an amendment to the paper since you last saw it. Obviously, we've received the appeals. I don't want to steal Belinda's thunder too much. We've provided links to the decisions and to the appeals there. And obviously, we will then need to go through to the Environment Court on this. So I'll let Belinda talk to this item a little bit more
Thank you,
when we have a
Kerry.
quorum. With the Mohaka, again, this item, we've got Kate Mcarthur and Bonnie Hartami coming to speak to you all about the work that they've been doing on the Māori-led work stream. So that verbal update will be later on in the piece. With Tank, we do have another date scheduled for hearings. Minute 9 was released just a few days ago, which indicated to everybody who has made a submission that that will be on the 27th of September, and we are making arrangements should we need to hold that as a virtual hearing. And that's, the WCO, essentially we're just waiting for a decision on this. We were asked to, all parties were asked to prepare their version of what they think the draft water conservation order should be. So we've done that, and we're just awaiting the decision on that. Yes, so that's all of those items there. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Kerry? Nothing at this stage, Kerry. Kia ora, Kerry.
Right.
See Belinda there, but like we say, we need, is her part the decision-making item then?
It is correct.
Yep. Okay. So moving on, shall we do item 11, which is the statutory advocacy update?
Yes, so again, we've highlighted in the paper in the red text this time where there have been some updates since the previous committee meeting. Probably the key one there is around the resource management reform and the fact that we have made a submission to this in terms of the Natural and Built Environments Act, the exposure draft. I think that's probably the key highlight of, and probably worth noting that Napier City Council have released their draft district plan and spatial picture, and we will be making a submission on this by the 17th of September. And the Central Hawksbay district plan, we did make a submission on that, and we've provided the link there to the website where we've put the details of the submission, a copy of the submission. That they are the highlights of our statutory advocacy update.
Madam Chair, sorry, just an update. We have a quorum now.
Okay, you have a question for Kerry?
Yes, thank you. Kerry, or possibly even James, given our recent discussions, just looking at our opposition to the NCC resource application, bottom of page 30 with that new subdivision in Te Awa. I know the submission there is online, but given our earlier discussions and around things, water and coastal hazards, etc., and floods, is there any, have you linked to that? Or what are your thoughts in and around how this one might land?
I'll defer to Kerry or Gavin if he's on the line on that one.
Sorry, just bear with me. This is the Te Awa subdivision.
Yes, so we're previously in other meetings had a lot of discussions around low-lying land and potential contingent liabilities there. And of course, in a larger context, our coastal hazards discussion and potential liability we may take on because of that, which is still yet to be resolved. And there we go, we've got a consent in, and we're actively we're submitting on it. I just wondered if you could enrich any of that, because I imagine most observers of this haven't gone to our page and read our submission.
Yes, so we did initially raise some concerns with this subdivision, largely because it was a gated development and there was only one point of exit, which was towards the sea. We were in direct liaison with Lisa Pearce around this. She's has raised significant concerns with subdivisions in that low-lying area and the impact, excuse me, of tsunami risk. So essentially that was the crux of the submission in the first instance. We've taken or had conversations with Napier City Council and the Durham Property Investments as well, and their I guess solution to this was to produce a evacuation plan, and there was an indication also that they would reconsider whether it was going to be a gated development or not. Look, ultimately the decision around that subdivision was with Napier City Council. We had highlighted the concerns with the risk in terms of the coastal inundation and the tsunami risk. And yeah, so the Durham Property Investments did provide that evacuation, will make a commitment to provide that evacuation plan as part of the application.
Sorry, for clarification, we only opposed initially on the fact that it had a gate around it and one entry, one out. You've had discussions around that. So earlier concerns, because the description here talks about tsunami risk, etc., but the precursor of just our general concern about further development of low-lying land in context of larger discussion and around coastal hazards and inundation, that hasn't formed any part of it. So I'm hearing from you, you seem to be satisfied now that agreement's in place, and we'll just watch with interest. Is that what you're really saying here?
Well, we've highlighted that there is a risk, but we don't. And this is a an ongoing conversation that we don't have enough teeth currently in the regional policy statement to avoid the development in this area.
Sure. So who bears the brunt of the risk then that you're talking about?
Yeah, so you're quite correct, Councillor Foss. There is a larger issue here that we need to have a discussion about, which is continued development of low-lying land that's in tsunami risk and liquefaction risk. We can't do that, as Kerry's saying, on this individual application, but what we need to be having is a broader conversation on a strategy level, and that's where we are putting together a bigger package of submissions and discussions to have with Napier City regarding their draft district plan and their spatial strategy. I know James has had a conversation with their chief executive, and we have organised some time to meet with the Napier City Council to present and have discussions around that before we lodge a formal submission.
That's fantastic. Thanks for the clarification. Then in reports such as the one we have here, which leaves us hanging with the implication that all is now hunky-dory because there's an agreement, can you just add a thread to all of that to bring all this together, exactly what you said there at the start there, Katrina, but however, there is a larger body of work going on and around some higher level concerns in this space. That would be fantastic. And thanks for that clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor Henewai-Womersley.
Kia ora koutou, tēnei te mihi, kia koutou I tēnei ata. My question's for you, mainly James. But the RMA repeal is going to have a huge, play a huge part on, the RPC and the 3 new proposed acts. So James, I believe that you're submitting with LGNZ on the Natural and Built Environments Act. Can you tell us, is this in your capacity as CEO for HBRC and in line with what HBRC is submitting on? Could you just give us an update on that, please?
Sure, through you, Chair. And look, I do intend as part of this agenda to more broadly present on the government's reform agenda and some thoughts around how we're navigating that. But on the specific question, yes, I'm presenting Local Government New Zealand's submission to the Select Committee tomorrow, and that is as the lead regional council CEO in the on the RM reform project. So I've been involved with drafting LGNZ's submission as part of the LGNZ community. We're raising issues around the existing arrangements, particularly with respect to the role of local democracy and local decision-making in the reforms. The primary concern is that the reforms as drafted propose a relegation of local council decision-making to a highly diluted model that has stronger central government direction and central government involvement and reduced local government participation. So that's a key focus. With respect to HBRC's submission on the bill, so that has focused solely on the Hawksbay Regional Planning Committee Act 2015, and obviously this committee. And it was not my intention in LGNZ's submission to raise the specific circumstances of our region. Having said that, we have directly discussed with officials who are preparing the legislation, as well as raised with ministers, including even the Prime Minister in a session recently, the fact of this committee, the fact of this legislation, and the importance that any reform is discussed and negotiated with the PSGs represented on this committee to ensure that any changes to the functions of this committee are done with the agreement of the participants. Hopefully that answers your question.
Good, and now I'm just aware we now have a quorum, so I'd like for us to go back up to our item 3 on the agenda, which is the confirmation of the 7th of July minutes, please.
I'll move the minutes for you, Chair.
Thank you, Rick. Can I have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Martin. All those in favour? Right. Kia ora. Have you got that noted, Annalie? Thank you.
Done.
Any discussion on the minutes? No, no discussion on the minutes. Kia ora. All right, now moving forward, I think there was a follow-up item on the previous meetings, page 3. Oh, we did that one, sorry. We've done that, sorry. Right, so we can go to the decision items, which are item 6, which is the freshwater management unit discussion. I think that's Kerry.
Yes, thank you. So you will have realised that the paper has been amended as a consequence of our workshop the other week. As we've stated in the paper there, we tried to schedule a workshop with Ngāti Kahungunu and the tangata whenua reps of the RPC, but we were unable to do that. And I just want to acknowledge the tangata whenua reps for allowing us to gate crash their hui last week and talk through the FMUs, the freshwater management units. It was a really good discussion. And as you'll see from the paper there, we've had a lot of consideration of how going out to our community, out to tangata whenua with, I guess, preformed ideas of what the freshwater management units should be, what the delineation of those should be, wasn't the right approach. And that was agreed between staff and the tangata whenua reps, that we actually needed to take a different approach to this. And as a consequence, we've agreed that we will go out to our communities and have a values conversation first, and then we'll be setting those freshwater management units at a later date. Chair, if I might, I think the point 6 there, point 5, there was a lot of conversation around the ability of the tangata whenua reps to, I guess, instigate these conversations within their iwi boundaries. And if you're agreeable to this, I'd be quite happy or keen for if Liz would explain a little further about her, or just introduce the process of the whare kōrero that you had talked about at our hui the other day, because staff are really, I guess, excited and encouraged about this, and we think that this is a really good opportunity for us to do something a little different.
Kia ora, kia ora koutou, and thank you for the opportunity. I just want to go back to that meeting. I felt there were quite a few milestones achieved there in that meeting, and I want to acknowledge, is it Christine? Yeah, can't see your name because I can just see your face now, but just want to acknowledge you and your team and Kerry for being open to trying to do this differently. We recognise that the FMUs already defined, or the options were creating some tension, and we were problem solving to try and work out how we remove the tension, but also keep the progress going, mindful that you've got a te kotahi program and all the rest of it, and having to consult with a whole lot of marae might present a problem. So though we still needed to do that. So I want to express our support that the idea of identifying values first and then coming up with the options around freshwater management units is a good way to go. But to assist the council and ourselves to be able to consult with all 23 of our marae, which is huge, we would run a whare kōrero series. So probably that comprises two hui, but well advertised. And what happens there, it's almost like a hearing, and the marae themselves present their values to you in a formal way, rather than us going out to them. We just create this venue where there's a fairly formal process for each marae to come across and present their values in relation to the and what that implication might be for the freshwater management units. So I was really keen to do that. We've done two of them now, the first in relation to the ratification of the deed of settlement and the PSG as an entity. We then did it just recently in relation to the constitutional review, and it's a way for our people of inviting participation and cooperation, but treating it with the seriousness that it deserves, because we're taking the time of our people to ask them to formalise their whakaaro around things. So it ticks all the right boxes. So that is that offer is there, and we'll be keen to get it going, so that and it will serve the purpose of the te kotahi as well. You know, that further down the process, it'll be a way of opening up the relationship, I think. So thank you if you are inclined to go down that track. I think it could work for all of us.
Does anyone have any further contributions to this paper?
Kia ora, Chair, Piri here. Just to acknowledge Heretaunga Tamatia, tēnei te mihi kia koe rā, Liz. But to also add to this, that the discussion also allowed other PSGEs and their respective takiwa rohe, because they also have other instruments by which we can engage in a values discussion. And so it was just acknowledging different places, different ways, I guess. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Tēnā wai?
Oh, tēnā te mihi kia koe, Liz. That's a fantastic idea. And you talk about the whare kōrero having two hui. Were you meaning just across the Heretaunga area in this scenario, to have two of those formal hui where marae can present? I think that strikes a fantastic balance in terms of formalising the process, giving it the respect it deserves by hearing what marae feel that their values are, as well as collecting the information that we can all work from, I think. So, you know, I think it's a fantastic idea. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui ki a koe, through you, Madam Chair. So I'll just take, first of all, the opportunity to acknowledge Liz's kōrero around generating options around how we might be able to achieve effective engagement and participation over these critical freshwater issues at a local and takiwā by takiwā basis. The second thing I would say is that I would acknowledge the staff and was very grateful to have their participation at the Tangata Whenua Reps Hui some weeks ago. And from my perspective, the changes to the paper on today's agenda reflect the commitment from HBRC around the kotahi plan and the need to remain flexible and adaptable to build the best solutions possible in a very tight time frame when both our staff and our residents and our Māori communities are under huge pressure from central government to achieve some significant change in freshwater management. So just a shout out to the staff for being willing and open-minded to considering new alternatives, and I guess by extension heralding what is a good indicator around a healthy forming relationship in the kotahi plan space, where flexibility and adaptability are reflected in the way that the paper was brought forward, open discussion was engaged, it's been revised, and we're now looking at some new tools and mechanisms to get some traction on these issues. So no questions to staff, but just acknowledging Liz's kōrero as well as Pierre's, so that that flexibility and adaptability will be interpreted rohe by rohe, but we very much welcome the opportunity to try various ways to engage our members in this topic.
Just one, Madam Chair. So that was a real team effort on that day, and I want to acknowledge that. Came from Api in the first instance, and then Tania, Hopman, and then our own team members in the council. And then it just sort of evolved, and I think to a point where you know, we went from thinking, oh dear, to this great, incredible feeling of seeing the beginning of a partnership relationship. I guess that's what came out of it for me at the end. And it took that process of talking it through, everyone contributing, and we landed at this place which I thought was quite monumental and a signal of where things can go in relation to the treaty partnership. So I do want to acknowledge, is it Christina? Is that your name, or Katrina? Yeah, because that was the moment when things really changed. And I know a lot of us have participated in local government for a long time. 1993, when I was in Waitakere City Council, and I was thinking, oh no. And then suddenly, we're in this new space. So I do want to acknowledge how momentous it is, and we should continue with it. And we're committed to giving all we can to make that whare kōrero for us. I acknowledge Tania, Hopman, they've got their own way, but for 23 marae, we've got to work out a way how it works for the council as well. We can't take you to every marae. Gosh, we'll be still doing the plan change next year. So so yeah, and thank you, Api, for your tautoko on the day. It was great.
Yeah, yes, it was exciting. Any further contributions to this particular kaupapa? So then can I just have somebody move that we report, receive the recommendation to defer making a decision on the freshwater management to a later date?
I move.
Kia ora Api and kia ora Rick. Thank you. Any further discussion on that? No. Thank you. That's the first Item
Thank
6
you all.
done. We're on to item 7 now, which is the proposed outstanding water bodies resolution of appeals, page 11, everybody. And that's the other major decision-making item we get to this morning. Thank you.
Okay, morning everyone. I'll keep this quick because I know you're running short on time. So I'll run through my stuff quite quickly and then I'll take some questions. Just before I start, I've got an unstable internet which keeps popping up a little note. So if I start flicking my video on and off, you know what's happening. So on to Plan Change 7. So in short, the independent panel released their decisions on the 26th of June and we notified them. Appeals closed on the 6th of August. 3 appeals have been received on quite a large variety of matters. And we've had 7 Section 274 parties join since then. And this paper really is just seeking delegation to settle those appeals during the mediation if we can. The paper sets out 2 options. The first option is a straight delegation to James to sign off on appeals. So that essentially is giving him this pretty much the sole discretion on a way to proceed. The second option is to hold a direction setting meeting with the co-chairs of the RPC and then delegate to James to sign off on appeals. So that's basically where things sit. So if you've got any questions, yeah, let me know.
One question from me, Madam Chair. With regards to the options presented at the within the recommendations of the staff, have there been examples where those mechanisms have been used successfully prior on other plan changes? And correspondingly, were there any that were tried and didn't work successfully?
I mean, going back to the plan changes I have been involved in, so going way back to the air plan change, which was changed to about 10 years ago, it was very successful and we settled all the appeals through the mediation.
And certainly, Belinda, there's precedent. I certainly know in my time, I can't remember exactly which occasions of being delegated power from council to resolve plan change mediation outcomes. So look, I don't think it's an unusual, unorthodox thing to do. I guess it's just in relation to this plan change, whether the committee is comfortable with that step.
Sorry, just to add to James, I see what the question was going now. It's standard practice to delegate authority to staff members or to the CEO to settle appeals. The Environment Court's practice note essentially says they don't want anyone turning up at appeals that doesn't have authority to settle on them. So there needs to be some sort of delegation, because the process of, if you were to come right back to the RPC on every issue, and it all evolves quite fast, it would just slow it right out. And it would almost be better to go straight to court.
So I think what Belinda's saying there, sorry, Belinda, your internet just faded out there for a minute. So the Environment Court directs everybody to mediation, and it is their preference that we resolve matters through mediation rather than going to court. And when you're in that session of caucusing and mediation, you need to be flexible and ready to settle in the moment, rather than bringing the matter back to the council, seeking agreement, then going back and re-establishing mediation. It's too long. You've got to be quite reactive and ready to settle in the moment.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Before I take a question from Craig, then Martin, then Apiata again, Can you please state your name when you talk, because we have Mike that's on a phone and can't see who's speaking. So if we could just do that.
Apologies.
Sure, everybody. So Craig, thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Mike. Craig Foss here. Good morning. A question to James, actually, and thanks. And actually, some of my question was starting to be answered there, I think. But James, the implications, any wider precedent that's set, and the parameters with under which you operate, if you, as you are the decision-making body at mediation, perhaps. Can you just give us any thoughts as to the risks in and around that, or any other things that could be of interest to councillors? I think we're all very much of a mind, hopefully this proceeds positively, but as always, I'm just looking at the wider context for many other plan changes and judicial processes we may be involved in, and around how that works, but also the parameters that you referenced going into this one. Thanks, Chair.
So, Chair, my intention would be to be guided by all of the policy decisions taken by this committee to date, and to test any agreement reached in mediation against those agreed policy positions. If the mediation is consistent with the policy intent of this committee, then I would agree to what is mediated. If what's put forward is contrary in any material way to the policies as agreed by this committee, then I would want to bring those matters back and not agree to them in the mediation process, or go to the court, essentially go to the next step where we could seek more guidance and seek to resolve that through the Environment Court process.
Thank you, James. Finally, why this committee and not the council? You keep going about the policy decisions of this committee. It's actually an advisory committee, very powerful, but actually it's the end of that, it's the council that gives you that mandate.
It is. Look, I'm just mindful of the fact that this committee has a particular statutory basis, and the policy positions taken of this committee can't be deviated from by council without recourse back to this committee as per the 2015 legislation. So I'm just acknowledging that essentially the policy positions of this this committee are primary in this exercise, but certainly in terms of Plan Change 7, council did sign off on the recommendations of this committee.
Sure, James. Martin, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Look, just before I get to the question, the reflection I have is that the resolution here is to recommend to the council that we delegate to the CEO the ability to settle appeals. The practice note in the Environment Court is not quite as sharp on this as maybe feared, in that you can get leave of the court to do things a different way, but it is very much the preference, and to make mediations work, the people in the room do have to have the ability to sign on the dotted line, but you could get leave. In the circumstances of this committee as a recommending body could be a ground for doing that. My question is a very simple one, though. A more, I guess, machinery type question. I'm wondering if I've got the right terms of reference, because in the paper, at paragraph 4 of the paper, it sets out a clause, or section 4.9 and section 4.10 of the terms of reference. But the terms of reference I've got on Stella don't have a 4.9 and a 4.10, and the equivalent clauses are worded quite differently. So my question is, do I have an out-of-date terms of reference on Stella? And I just wouldn't mind knowing that I've got the correct documents in front of me in considering this in substantive terms.
So I can answer that, Martin. Sorry about my connection before, it just kicked me straight out. I got given those and I just was assuming they were the up-to-date ones, so I can go back and check that for you. I didn't take them directly from the the document. So it was just here provided to me, and I cut them straight into there. So I'll check them out and let you know.
Sure, it may be the other way around, Belinda. It may be that you've got the up-to-date ones and on Stella we've got the old ones. Or, I'm not sure. I just wanted to clarify.
Apiara, you have a question?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is to the Chief Executive, really. So this whole process since this Act was brought before us as regional authorities to consider and to bring about some changes has been fraught with challenges. So that historical background, as well as the submissions which have been provided through all of the committees and all of the various channels and are now within this legal context, by providing delegated authority to the Chief Executive, how would you be able to provide openness and transparency for those issues which are perhaps not immediately in alignment with the outcomes of Hawksbay Regional Council? And in this case, I'm speaking with iwi positions on certain matters that are that your delegated authority will address. How can you provide confidence in that process? So this is not to challenge your role or to challenge the delegated authority. My opinion is that it's still the most efficient and best way to go forward. So it's about finding a balance between efficiency and openness and transparency. So could you provide me with some comments, please, James, around how you think you would be able to provide for openness and transparency and still maintain some speed in this process?
Thank you. And through you, Chair. So look, I think my answer to that's largely similar to the one that I gave Councillor Foss, which is that look, I consider the policy positions taken on this plan change by this committee as the boundary conditions, for want of a better term, for really mediated settlement. And so I'm very mindful of the hard work that everyone has put into making this committee work. And it is essential both legally, but also in the spirit of this committee, that council officers, including myself, don't undertake any actions that would undermine the agreements previously reached by this committee. So that's why I do think that the policy positions taken to date by this committee are the parameters that determine the freedom with which we might come to any agreement in mediation. And what I'm happy to do is ensure that any issues of mediation that are brought for decision making to me are transparently reported to this committee, and it's the reference of those decisions to the policy positions taken by this committee are explicit. So you can see not only the decisions taken, but how they align to the preferences and policies of this committee. And if in the event that, as I said earlier, there's a matter which drags us outside of the previous views of this committee, then it would be my intention to take that through the Environment Court stage and seek further guidance from this committee. I just don't think it's helpful for our collective journey with the Hawksbay Regional Planning Committee to be deviating from previously agreed positions through mediation. And that might mean that there's a bit less flexibility than I might otherwise have to agree in mediation. But I think the paramount objective here has to be the continued good faith and functioning of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And through you, Madam Chair, I appreciate those comments, James, and I'll speak in support of the paper with a preference to 2.2, recommendation 2.2.
Has anyone got any further kōrero they want to add to this?
Me.
Kia ora, Liz.
Tēnā no koe. James, the question I have relates to recommendation 2.2. What's the value add, or how complicated does it make things if you have to, I guess, liaise with the co-chairs before making a decision? I know that puts some kind of protection for tangata whenua, but does it really help the process? I mean, how would that work? Are they attending the mediation, I guess, is the only way I can see the efficiency question being managed.
So my expectation is that we would have to have very quick conversations called together at short notice to agree on a position in more or less real time as the mediation process is rolling through. So it's just really a question of practical availability of the co-chairs. But look, having said that, I think there is potentially some benefit if that provides comfort to everybody that the assurances I gave previously about adhering to the previously agreed policy preferences of this committee just need a greater level of assurance. I'll defer to Katrina or Kerry or Belinda if there's any further comment they want to make in relation to the practicalities of this.
There's just, I'll just jump in just quickly. There is a slightly different alternative to that where we could meet with the co-chairs initially. Sorry, I'll stop my video in case it's jumping. So we could do an initial meeting with the co-chairs and we could set out all the appeal points and then go through them and some direction could be set. Yes, there's some flexibility here, or no, there's not some flexibility here, and then go forward. And if it's within those parameters, then we've got an ability to settle at appeals. And if it's not, then we come back to them during the mediation or after the mediation.
I'm interested to hear Councillor Barker's.
If I may, Chair, I just think if people want 2.2, I think you just have to let the people concerned work out the best means of making this work in the circumstances they find themselves in. It may be that we can do a lot of this prior to the discussion being held. It may be that James says this is finally balanced. I need to see how this flows. And on the day, Janelle and I might just be on standby by the phone for a quick con call. I mean, there is multiple ways to skin the cat. I'm just wondering the value of trying to figure out all of the options that we can cover off before we do it. If that's what people want, just say, well, that's what we want, and let the people concerned figure out how to make it work.
Whatever.
I don't know why we try and second guess it.
I really was about to just show the, I asked the question, because if it's just a step, but not more than that, is there any point to it, I guess? And are you not, I think if there's no real value add, then perhaps we ought to trust the decision of the chief executive, I guess, is where I was going.
I would have thought there could be a value add, because being in those situations on occasions, there are, on a number of things, there are not absolutely clear lines. For me, there's a greyness. And it then leaves all of the pressure on one set of shoulders to make the decision. And I thought 2.2 was actually helpful in that if the chief executive, the co-chairs had a bit of a chat about something, it makes it easier for the decision to be made. And I think just a touchstone to help. So if you don't have that, then it's all rests on James. And I personally trust James implicitly, but I thought 2.2 was being helpful for him.
Thank you.
So, Chair, look, I'm very comfortable with 2.2 and Belinda's suggestion of the prior discussion on the points for mediation. I make the observation that I feel that this plan change has been pretty thoroughly tested and worked through over a number of years and a number of steps in the process. So any significant departure from the previously agreed position, my preference would be to have resolved by the court and not through mediation. So really what I'm signalling is that I think mediation provides some opportunities for some issues at the margins, as Councillor Barker's described, where there is some ambiguity around interpretation, etc. But around really significant and substantial matters, of which there are a number in the appeals, I think they are matters that need to be resolved ultimately by the court. This committee and this council has spent a lot of time trying to resolve many of those issues, and we have tested it pretty thoroughly. This is a new area of jurisprudence, given that there has not been any appeals, I don't believe, on outstanding water bodies plan change yet in the country. So it might be that we do need the judiciary to make some determinations here. And I'd certainly rather the judiciary was in that bind rather than putting myself into that position.
Kia ora, James. Kia ora, Piara.
Ngā mihi nui through you, Madam Chair. So really appreciated all of that discussion, and I'm happy to move the recommendation 2.2.
Kia ora. Can I have a second of it?
Got Charles waving his hand on screen.
Kia ora, Charles. So we have a move and a second of to in the recommendations for 2.2, which is the Hawksbay HBRC's Chief Executive or appointed legal counsel Plan Change 7 appeal proceedings, the authority to sign on council's behalf agreements of parties on appeals relating to the proposed Plan Change 7, generally in accordance with an agreed position determined in liaison with the co-chairs of the Regional Planning Committee prior to mediation commencing. That we moved by Apiara Tapene and seconded by Charles Lambert. Would you like to speak to your...
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to speak to that. So just to reiterate those comments from both Liz Munro and Chairman Barker, there is absolute confidence in the delegations of the Chief Executive. This has been a very long process. We're now at the final stage of a legal process of the Environmental Court. There have been submissions, a number of meetings, wānanga across the rohe. So it is at one point very good to be drawing this particular stream of work to a conclusion. But I'm particularly in favour of 2.2 because of the optics that it provides in support of this very long process and the support that it gives our Chief Executive to help provide good visual optics around mitigation and negotiation are key aspects, as the Chair calls it, around the fringes. And so with regards to that, I look forward to James being able to secure the best positions available for the parties represented, and we wait eagerly on the results of the Environmental Court.
Charles, would you like to speak to that motion?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I support the 2.2 on the basis that it most conforms to the parameters of the RPC, of the Regional Planning Committee anyway. So, kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Charles. Okay, we've got a move and a second. Any discussion on that? Further discussion?
I am going to say, Madam Chair, that I think as a sign of maturity, that we could go with 2.1. I'll just leave that there.
No further comments. I put the resolution to the committee in terms of Apiara as the mover and Charles as the seconder of adopting 2.2 of the outstanding water bodies plan change recommendations. So can I have a show of hands? Thumbs up. 1, 2, 3. Annalie, are you counting? 4,
Correct.
5, 6, 7. I'm 7. Do we have the numbers, Annalie?
Just counting. Looks like 10.
Yeah. All those against?
Yeah.
3.
Is that the
We don't have a
resolution?
quorum. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Is that the resolution pass?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Resolution has been passed.
Madam Chair, just a point of procedure. I'm not entirely confident that the previous motion to do with the FMU recommendation was actually voted on as opposed to moved and seconded. I'm not sure if a vote was actually taken on that. I may have missed it.
Could you also check the 80% thing? Because I'm not sure if 10 over
That's
13
right.
is 80%.
That's exactly right. 3 out of 13 ain't 80. 10 out of 13 ain't 80%.
I think it's 14. Yeah, 11 out of 14. That's the 80%.
Oh, 11, I thought it was 10.
Yeah, it's 11 out of 14. If we have 14 members here, then it's 11.
Yes, but only 10 voted in favour.
Yes.
That was the number you said
Yes.
earlier. So
I
therefore, it's not 80%.
Yeah.
Have we got 14 here?
We've got 15 members online.
So 2 didn't vote at all. Corona and Mike.
Well, Mike can't show Mike. You'll have to ask Mike whether he supports or not because he's on the phone call, as I understand it.
Oh, no, Mike.
I'll change my vote if I'm allowed.
Well, if you keep with your vote, Liz, you might actually get your motion carried. We
I
have
think
just
I was
changed
just expressing a view of confidence in the process that was being espoused by the Chief Executive.
I get that, and I agree with you too.
Yeah, but I'll be happy to change my vote to enable the resolution to be passed. I think we need to keep moving.
Thank you, Liz. Noted.
We can work this out.
Everybody, that's a job and a half trying to get used to.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. I voted for yes as well.
Okay.
Kia ora, Corona.
Okay. Thank you, Corona.
Thank you, Kia ora. And just going back on, I think it was the freshwater management unit. Is that right, Martin? Just
Yes.
checking if we
I remember it being
pass
moved
that.
and seconded, and you said no further discussion, but I wasn't sure that a vote was put.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just go back on that then.
I thought the chair was basically saying the
All
motion
good?
was carried by consensus, as there's no dissent to it.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yep. That's how it works.
I'm not entirely sure, but it's a good theory.
Why don't we just do it so it's nice and tidy, because it's quite a substantive thing as a part of a bunch of dominoes. And as Liz's earlier words, it's very important and respect for the work that's got into it. Let's just register that, I don't know, whatever the number is, 11 or whatever,
Okay.
in favour.
Yep, I'm happy to put that again then, and a show of hands for support for that. And if we do, I think it's item 6 again, decision making. I'm happy to put that to the vote. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Rona,
Aye.
9. Mike? Yes or no?
We've got 13 at the moment. Don't know about Mike.
So we've got 13 out of the 14. Do we still have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Kia ora. Resolution is passed.
Correct.
Kia ora. All right. Moving on. What time was the people coming for the Mohaka update?
They're online, Madam Chair. Kate Mcarthur.
Okay, what's our timing like? Okay, cool. Okay, so if we just move now to item 8 on the our agenda, which is the update, verbal update on the Mohaka plan change process that's happening. Kia ora, everybody.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, if I might just introduce our wonderful team who have been working so diligently on our Māori-led work stream for the Mohaka. We have Kate Mcarthur, who will be our key presenter today, and she's supported by Dwayne Colshaw and Bonnie Hartami, and as you all know, Robin Hapi is also watching today. That's not the entire team. Kate will, I guess, allude to this a little bit further, but I just wanted to acknowledge them and welcome them to the RPC today. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora, Kiri.
Welcome.
I'm going to ask Bonnie and Dwayne to kick us off, and I'll jump in later. But kia ora tātou.
Maku e ki tuatahi a haere tunu te mihi mahana ta mihi manaha ki ngā koutou. Ka haere mai ki konei hei whakāturanga e tikiti nei a kaupapa whakahirehira ma mātou. E haere te mea a he kōrero nohio, puta tu manako he kia tia ki tia tunu tia te mauri o tō tātou awa ara ko te awa Mohaka. Thank you, Madam Chair, and everyone else for the opportunity to come in and listen on this. This is not just a simple presentation or conversation. It's probably a bigger conversation about the mauri of our beloved river. I just want to acknowledge the team that I've been running. Please don't look at me as a council officer today. I'm definitely on the side of the project team. So I'll hand this over to Bonnie. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Dwayne.
Tato, just checking you can hear me. All good. So obviously it's long history before this project team has come about. But I just wanted to do a little bit of an introduction of what has happened prior before I bring in kōrero on the team. August 2020, we had iwi reps, marae reps, and land blocks meeting in Napier. We talked about issues and aspirations, brought in the Hawksbay regional team to meet everybody. At that hui, it was recommended by Tūwhare Toa that we create PO, which will be our, I guess, tenets of how we operate. So we are all connected by whakapapa, we're all connected to the awa, and it was a way to bring in all of that information that we already have, treaty settlements, strategies and plans, and just have kind of a base line for everybody who's participating. At the end of 2020, I was part of the internal Hawksbay Regional Council team, so that was going around doing the community meetings and participating with Hawksbay Regional Council, the project team. We then decided for a better outcome for tangata whenua, we agreed to resource this team, this tangata whenua project team, and there's been quite a bit of work since that happened, and it's really exciting to present to you all, so thank you. So just in terms of the screen that you can see there, there's myself, so I'm representing Ngāti Pāhauwera Development Trust, and also a couple of other land blocks that I am on. We've got Kate Mcarthur, who she can introduce herself, Dwayne, who is a Ngāti Pāhauwera member, and yeah, he does work for Wairoa District Council, but he's coming in to advise on kind of more strongly in the with his reo and tikanga. Vanessa Tipoki is she's going to be working at the. She's been involved from the beginning, but her part is as a Māori planner. We've got Beverly, who has been working on the PO that I was talking about. So she's provided to us a draft of the PO to Kate and myself to keep working on. And then in the bottom there, Catherine Gale is she's Ngāti Pāhauwera. She's a freshwater scientist as well. So she is employed by the Gisborne District Council, but she is contracting as part of this team. And yeah, it's a very exciting space to be in. I don't know if that's about it from me, Kate, if you want to.
Sure, kia ora, Bonnie. Ngā mihi nui ki koutou. For those who don't know me, my name's Kate Mcarthur. I trained originally as a freshwater ecologist, but I've worked largely over the last 20 years in the space between freshwater policy and science. I have a bit of a niche in both of those worlds. For my sins, I've been appointed by the Minister for the Environment as Freshwater Commissioner in the new freshwater planning process. But in this case, I'm not going to be sitting and hearing. I'm going to be helping develop and create the plan process. So I'm very privileged to be working amongst such an expert team. It's a very exciting piece of work. It is, as far as I know, one of the first partnership approaches. Sorry, Liz. So it's one of the first partnership approaches under the new planning process in the country. So it's pretty groundbreaking stuff. The Mahaka Catchment, essentially our plan process, depending on how the FMUs fall out a little bit, we're waiting to hear how that's come down, but it's generally all of the Mahaka River catchment. Every tributary includes Te Awa Stream, Waitaha Stream, Waihua River, and all those small coastal waterways in between there, all of the wetlands, all of the springs, lakes, lagoons, groundwater and aquifers in the catchment. So that's what we are including in our planning process. Essentially, the RMA amendments in 2020 are the legislative impetus for this planning process across the country, which of course has been brought in to give effect to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater 2020. And as I'm sure you're all well aware, all freshwater plans in the country are required to be notified by 31 December 2024, heard and then decided within the following 2 years. So that's a very fast process. There's quite limited appeal rights in there. To me, that kind of signals a real imperative in the direction of the legislation and the policy to get it right the first time round to the degree that we possibly can. We can't talk about a freshwater planning process without some discussion of Te Mana o Te Wai. It is the fundamental concept for all freshwater management under the MPSFM, and it is relevant to every single aspect of freshwater management under the National Policy Statement. It does, of course, have that prioritised way of looking at freshwater, where the first priority is really the health and well-being of water bodies and freshwater ecosystems. Secondly, looking to the health needs of people, and then thirdly, basically everything else. There's a few different levels at which Te Mana o Te Wai operates within the National Policy Statement. First is that obligation that I just talked about, but there's some really important principles embedded within the policy statement. And they've been expressed, there's 6 different principles, 3 of them expressed in Te Reo Māori, looking at mana whakahaere, kaitiakitanga and manaakitanga as key principles for tangata whenua involvement in freshwater management. And then, of course, relevant to this group is the governance principle as well as that. We then look also to who are the leaders in this process, and really it comes down to there being tangata whenua and Māori landowner and iwi hapu leadership in there alongside the Crown, the agents of the Crown in terms of local government and the community. So what we've got is a legislative framework, the freshwater plan process, in order to give effect to a national policy statement. And then we've got the national policy statement, which basically requires you to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai. That's our boundary for what we need to do in this process. When it comes down to it on the ground, there's a very clear, quite prescriptive process in the national policy statement for freshwater. Although it might not be easy, I think it's really useful that it has such clarity embedded within it. It's basically a stepwise progression through this is what you do. And really, I'll just skip through it very briefly, because it's really a whole, couple of hours wānanga on its own, how to go through the NOF process. But it requires the expression of Te Mana o Te Wai at the regional and at the local level. And then it requires the development of long-term visions for freshwater and management units. And then once you have that framework set out of what is your management unit and who is your community of interest, it's really talking about what are the values within each FMU, what are the environmental outcomes for those values that you want that are in line with the long-term visions and that sit under Te Mana o Te Wai. What are the attributes by which you are going to measure the outcomes? What's your targets and timeframes? And then what management actions are you going to undertake in the plan in order to get you there by the time you want to get there? And then we monitor everything and we say, oh, it's all going swimmingly well, and in 20 years, everything will be fixed. So it's a pretty prescriptive process. It follows through each of those steps. I think the important thing is that section 3.4 of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management sets out the involvement of tangata whenua in this process. And it very clearly says that tangata whenua are to be involved at every step, including decision making, and that councils need to enable and work collaboratively with tangata whenua in the freshwater planning process, and that tangata whenua are actively involved in decision making. So really it says at every step, it's important to be working together and to enable and to engage. So for the Mahaka Catchment, we did some scoping work late last year and early this year over what would a freshwater plan process look like, having a tangata whenua work stream sitting alongside the council work stream, and what would we need to do. And so I've worked through scoping the project out and looking at what the critical steps are, what the outputs need to be, so that we can move through the process that's required by the National Policy Statement. Essentially, we've developed a 5-phase project. It's likely to take at least 2 to 3 years to complete that. And the first 2 phases have been contracted and funded by Hawksbay Regional Council, so they're underway now. Body introduced us, the tangata whenua work stream has its own fully independent team and process. but we are working in partnership with the Hawksbay Regional Council team, and we had a really good hui last week between the two teams, where we were able to kind of catch up and start to get our processes in sync. Oh, my clicker isn't working, sorry. Here we go. So basically the 5 phases, and I'm gonna mash a lot of work into a very small number of words. Phase 1 is really about looking at what are the freshwater management mechanisms that tangata whenua might want to implement in the Mahaka Catchment. So the National Policy Statement really talks specifically about things like joint management agreements, mana whakahonua rohi, participation agreements, shared and delegated powers. So that's the first kind of discussion which is required to be had under the MPS. Just as an aside, in some of our freshwater commissioner training, we've had the chief freshwater commissioner, Professor Peter Skelton, said he would expect that if we were sitting and hearing a new freshwater plan process, that it is beholden on the council to be able to prove and establish that line of sight between what the MPS requires of them in terms of tangata whenua involvement and what has occurred. So looking at joint management or delegations of powers or mana whakahonua rohi agreements, there needs to be a very clear line of sight that that engagement and that conversation has occurred and what sort of decisions have been made around that. So we've begun that process. Following that, we're just reviewing the draft Mahaka Po at the moment, which are really going to be what is the foundation of bringing together the iwi and hapu tangata whenua organisations across the catchment, because there are multiple, and how do we find common ground on which to begin this plan. Then we need to have a conversation about what does Te Mana o Te Wai mean for the Mahaka, what are the long-term visions, what are the values for tangata whenua, and what are the environmental outcomes associated with those values. So that's phase 1. And then phase 2, which has also been funded, is really to look at what is the state of the catchment now, what are the attributes we might use to monitor those tangata whenua values, what do we want it to look like, what are the targets, and how long might it take to get there, and then really to start working at what are the things that need to be limited or what needs to be maintained or what needs to be improved in order to ensure those environmental outcomes, long-term visions, and Te Mana o Te Wai are given effect to. And then really communicating those outcomes. So those 2 phases have been funded and our work's underway. Phase 3 really gets down to what does that look like in the plan? What does the RPS objective around Te Mana o Te Wai look like? What does a long-term vision, what does the statement for a long-term vision for the catchment look like? And then what are the objectives, the policies, the methods, and the rules that might sit within the plan to support those earlier 2 phases. And also keeping in mind, trying to document how we've got into that place in terms of developing those policy mechanisms through the Section 32 reporting, making sure that we're picking that up as we go. So phase 3 is really where Vanessa Tipuki from Kahu is really going to take the lead on holding the pen. She's got quite a lot of experience in this area. She's currently working in the Te Whanganui Ātara Whai Tour in Wellington on doing precisely this kind of process work here. So we're really pleased to have her expertise on board. Phase 4 is where things get crunchy. It's really the review of the plan as a whole. So this is where we bring our strands together and we weave them into one plan. It is about negotiating what the hard stuff is, because you can't avoid it, there will be some. It's about bringing it all together and bringing together a plan that is an agreed plan for notification. That's the ultimate goal, is to get us out of legislative fighting and taking things to the courts, and being able to say we've both done our work alongside each other, we've followed the policy recommendations, and we have one plan to notify. That's the gold standard to reach. And phase 5 is implementing the plan and monitoring it and developing action plans and all of the bits to actually make it work on the ground with the people who live there. Easy. I guess the most exciting part we've got to report is we've kind of come some way in that first phase. And we have in June held a hui in Waipahihi Marae in Taupō. So we thought we wanted to start up the top of the catchment in the rohe of Tūwhare and work our way down the catchment as we progress through this planned process. And so we had drawn together Mohaka Tangata Whenua Leaders Rōpū, which we had really fabulous attendance at. I know a couple of you in the audience today were there. It was an awesome hui, but really that provides the mandate for having a collective tangata whenua involvement in this planned process. Makes sure everybody's voices are heard and acknowledged and represented through this process. The leaders Rōpū are really going to be critical to the project team in terms of being able to review and approve each stage of our work. We've got 3 major reporting excuse me, lines that come through in phase 1 and phase 2. And really it's a matter of being able to bring that back to the Rōpū, have them look through, make sure it is all tika pono, and give us approval for that to come out into the public forum. We hope that they will support and champion the team and the project outputs, which I'm sure they will. And they're really critically important for that mana whakahaere principle to progress the management and governance approaches with the council and with the RPC group as well, in terms of how does tangata whenua involvement in decision making at every level, how is that reflected in the process that we're undertaking here. So there's been a little bit of discussion of co-design frameworks. It's a little bit of a catchphrase. We had a big discussion about this in our hui last week, and we've come to a kind of agreed way of going, and feel free to jump in here, Dwayne or Bonnie, that we prefer a partnership model. It's really about taking 2 strands which have their own integrity and mana, and bringing those together into one plan. So they're still individual strands, but they come together as one woven piece of work. That's our kind of guiding goal in this process at the moment, and the way in which we're framing the work that we do here. When we look at it from a plan perspective, what does that mean? Really, to the left there is plan A. That's how we want it to work, is that there are 2 clear strands of work, and that there are touch points along the way where we come together and we bring our ideas together to make one idea greater than the sum of its parts, and that there are shared decisions made around that TAS's target attribute states, so where we want to get to and where we want to be in future and by when, and then eventually shared recommendations on the plan itself. That's plan A. We're also working on plan B, because it's really important that we have a plan B just in case things get out of sync. Synchronizing these pieces of work is quite a major undertaking in its own right. And we're just making sure that the lines of communication between the HBRC team and the tangata whenua team are open and transparent. I guess that's our goal. So that's really it in a nutshell. We've got a lot of work to do over the next 2 years. We're hoping to have completed by the end of this year our wānanga on Te Mana o Te Wai, long-term visions, environmental outcomes and tangata whenua values. That's really the foundation of how we move forward in developing a plan for the Mahaka Catchment. I'll hand back to my team leaders on this if they want to add anything in there, or if anyone has any questions.
How do I get back in?
Nothing to add from me, just apart from, I guess, the creation of the team and the hui that was held in Taupō has given us a lot of confidence that this is the right thing to do and that this will work. And I think that the feedback that we have received from all of the people that attended in Taupō has been very positive. So yeah, so Api's just got something wanting to close the presentation. Yeah, so that's it. So as a representative of one of the iwi, and also having been in this process for quite some time, yeah, this definitely feels like this is the way to go. So that's it from me.
Kia ora tātou, nothing further from me. I just want to thank everyone for the time, for listening, and thanks Kate for presenting a well presented presentation. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Dwayne. So I guess we were wondering if anyone had any questions that they wanted to ask about the process so far, and I'll just echo Bonnie's feelings about feeling quite supported in this being the right way to go. I think the leaders Roku, Hui and Taupō, the very clear direction coming from that group was to proceed collaboratively and to try to work together to the degree possible and having one approach.
Questions for you, Madam Chair.
Question.
Awesome presentation. So I'll take the time to acknowledge, first of all, the significant change that's happened over the last 12 months in the formation of the Mahaka plan, particularly between HBRC and our mana whenua people working on the ground or in the river. So my question is around those are really, really positive statements, and you framed the challenges in positive ways. So are there any key challenges going forward that you might think are beneficial to bring to the attention of the Regional Planning Committee that wasn't necessarily evident or a key feature of your presentation?
There are always challenges in freshwater planning processes. It's as we know, it takes up a lot of our time and space and resource management. So we expect challenges to come. We invite them, otherwise the work would be boring. But I think what I can see is potentially being a little bit different here is that we have a lot of the land trusts involved, and I think that that is a new way of undertaking this. I think it's really positive, but I think it's going to be a challenge for all of us how we bring together and bring in those entities into the plan. I don't see it at all as a negative, but I do see it as an area where we will keep needing to come back and go, are we doing this right? And just to check in with that process. But I think it's incredibly exciting to be undertaking a plan that is set with that framework. And then of course there's the usual challenges of where do we want to get to, how long will it take, and who bears the pain? And there's nothing that's going to take those challenges away. They are just part of freshwater management, and I think we just need to remain open to the fact that they're challenges and try to deal with each other in a collaborative and kind way.
Yeah, I would add to that. Each hui that we have, or each wānanga that we have, may not be have attended the previous ones. So re-educating or bringing people up to speed, and maybe being challenged is something that might happen. And yeah, I think one of the other things that came from the hui in Taupō was well, basically the comment was, well, when are we meeting again? This is great. And there is no budget for that. To logistically, that's a big thing to do, is to bring everybody together in Taupō. And so a lot of the entities were wanting to continue to work together. So this project team can't deliver everything that might be wanted by individual entities. And so looking at how they can be supported We had thought, you know, Te Mana o Te Wai funding, but that's closed. So just looking at ways to support those other entities. So we are their team. So we are working for them, but there are things that we can't do at place. So that it's a huge catchment and something that we have to look to do practically.
Mm. Yeah, I think in reflecting on what Bonnie's just said, that another of the challenges is likely to be that we're not going to get it perfect by 2024. We just aren't. This is our first cut at doing this in this way, and we are all learning at every step as we go. And that it's not going to be perfect, but I think what's important to the team is being able to document as we go, where is the next step and how do we move forward on the things that aren't perfect and won't necessarily get across the line by 2024. And I think if we do justice to recording that and keeping on collecting that train of what comes next and how do we progress it and how do we get it as close to perfect as we can, I think that does justice to what people bring to the table.
Do we have any questions for the team? Members want to ask?
Madam Chair.
Martin. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Kate. I would say that the Mohaka is in very good hands.
Kia ora.
Can you just go back a slide or two? There was one about community outcomes and I think it was mana whenua outcomes. You better put that up again?
Yes, working on making that happen. Let's see. This one here, is that the right one? Oops, you can't see it. Let's try sharing it. Does that look right?
Yep. Right. Yeah, okay. So I had in mind the woven flax model, which I thought was really galvanizing in terms of it's a weaving of world views, or rather than sort of one side by side, not aligning, it's actually an intersection of things. And my understanding of the way that I was trying to read the NPS while you were talking, my understanding is the outcomes that you have in the top of that slide become objectives for each FMU,
yes.
Which would be the objectives like that we're familiar with in planning parlance. And then you'd have sort of policies, methods and rules, including attribute, bottom lines, limits and things like that that flow from them. I guess my question in that context and with that sort of weaving of flax strands in mind is, aren't mana whenua the community? And aren't the community in part mana whenua? How is there really this divide? What did you mean by community values versus mana whenua values? Who's the community?
Well, I think the MPS is very clear about tangata whenua having a different role to the community at large. That reflecting, of course, the treaty. That's the model under which Te Mana o Te Wai has been brought about. So it does reflect that tangata whenua have a different role to the community at large. That being said, for the Mohaka, much of the community are tangata whenua. So in some instances here, we don't have so much difference, but there are parts of the community that are not tangata whenua, and so they have their role in this as well. And our expectation is that the Hawksbay Regional Council team will be leading the engagement with the community, whereas we will lead the engagement with tangata whenua. And it is about separate strands being woven together. So I think we need to be really careful about trying not to be assimilative, so that those strands do hold their own integrity, so people can see their story in the plan and not see it kind of mangled together. Maybe you've got one objective for tangata whenua and you've got one for community, and let's smash them together into one. I don't know that that's necessarily the solution. I think people need to see their line drawn through the plan in this way, and I think that's what the MPS requires us to do.
Yeah, thank you. That intersection set's going to be the fascinating thing, isn't it? Thank you very much for that explanation.
Thank you.
Kia ora, take Liz's question and then Hinewai.
Kia ora, Kate. Look, this is the second time I've seen this presentation and it's great. I think you're trailblazing here. I just want to make a comment around the place of land trusts and Māori owners of Māori land within the rohe. There was a time when I would have thought they're just landowners like other landowners, is what I thought. And then over recent months, I've thought that through and thought, actually, they've got more mana than the PSGE, that the PSGE is the Crown construct. So, and so I'm quite firm about that now, how you find a place for the land trusts and Māori landowners within the rohe. I think that is another challenge, as if it isn't hard enough for our Pākehā whanaunga, I guess is a nice word to say, to fathom out the Niki and the PSGEs and the Tai Whenuas and the community development organisations and all of those things in Ngāti Kahungunu. That's hard enough. Now we're going to ask, or now we think it's right to include the Māori owners of ancestral land within the rohe. I mean, actually, their locus standi, I suppose, is stronger than anyone else's. So kia ora for identifying that. And I think, I look forward to when we have this discussion with the Regional Council about the Tuki catchment and the tank catchment and Porangahau. And I no doubt thank you for this work, because this will set a benchmark for that work. So thank you, and all the best to Ngāti Pāhuera and the Mohaka whānau. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Councillor Insworth, Hinewai.
Hi. Tēnā koutou ko Kate, ko Dwayne, ko Bonnie. Thank you for your presentation, and it's quite heartening to view, particularly this slide that you have up, Kate. And I just want to reinforce what Liz was just saying around ahika, that there is, that intrinsic strong link as mana whenua. When you're landowners, you're there, you're working the land. So I do acknowledge the importance of ahika roa. My question is really directed towards probably you, Kerry. And Kate, you had the sort of the best practice stages for your project. Could you bring up that slide?
Sure.
Yeah, the phases. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so those are phases that mana whenua have identified that they want to follow along the process. So Kerry, in terms of our mahi as Regional Council with the community as the other strand, do the phases look do they look similar to these phases at all, or do you have an idea of what the community phases of engagement will look like during this process?
It's a very good question. And yes, the community phases do look very similar. You might recall we actually presented to you a project work stream or a project plan, probably could be about 4 months ago now, maybe even longer ago than that, and which showed in quite a lot of detail the two work streams, so the Kate's work stream and the HBRC work stream, and then the middle work stream where we were coming together and joining together, which included the presentation of the reports from Kate's team and including things such as this presentation to the RPC. So yes, there are tandem work streams which are working towards the same sorts of milestones, if you like.
Fantastic. And I only say that because that will only make this process more successful if they're as aligned as possible, notwithstanding, mana whenua have theirs set in stone, but it's really for us to look at ours and how it aligns best with those phases. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Do you have any other questions for the team? No? Further questions from anyone? Well,
Kia ora, Chair.
koutou. Kia ora, Piri.
Ai. Anei rā te hunga reo e mihi rā ki o koutou o te awa tapu o Mahaka. Tēnei te mihi ki o koutou e kapo hia i o koutou ringa. Me ki rā ngā moimoi a ngā tūmanako i tuku i hu maira anō tai hoki rā ki o koutou ringa. Anō reira tēnei tāku e mihi ki o koutou katoa te hau kāinga whānui ake rā ke rungu ki tēnā o Mahaka, tēnā koutou huri no tēnā tātou.
Kia ora, Piri. Thank you for that. And thank you very much for coming, presenting that wonderful work that you're all doing. Kia ora.
Kia ora for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day. Kia pai. Kia manaki.
Kia ora, everybody. Ka pai, well done. I'm just conscious that on the agenda we've got 11:50 a.m. as lunch and we've just gone 7 minutes over. But I'm also mindful that we've got maybe 2 more items left on our agenda. So I'm comfortable to take ask members if they wish to take their lunch break and come back at 12:30 and finish off the last 2 items, if that's their wish, or do you wish to continue, or it's up to you?
For me, Chair, I'd prefer to proceed. I might get a 3/4 hour lunch if we proceed rather than half.
My preference is to proceed, Madam Chair, as I've got to depart at 12:30 and can't return for an hour.
Kia ora.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, so I take it from that people are happy to continue on with the remaining items on our agenda. And I think that is just item 12 we're up to, and then item 13. And there were no discussion of minor items on the agenda, so we've just got the last 2 items to do if people are quite happy for us to continue.
Madam Chair, item 9.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, item 9. I haven't highlighted that. That's yes. Item 9, 12 and 13 are the last 3 items. So if we go back up to item 9 and finish that one off, which is the initial draft of regionally significant issues, page 17, and I think we were hearing, I think that was you.
Yes, I'm happy to take this paper. I wasn't the author of this paper, and credit goes to Dale Meredith. She has, however, been working on our civil defence response and is hopefully taking a very well-earned day off today. So I will just quickly go through this and do my very best to address all of the information that she's put in the paper for you. As you can see from the executive summary, this paper was, I suppose, a wrap-up of the 2 workshops that we've held around the regionally significant issues. Those issues will be brought through into the regional policy statement of Kotahi, but just again to highlight to you all that these are very much in draft at this stage, and we will be having ongoing conversations with our community around this. 2 of the key points just worth highlighting is that we, through the workshop, heard that obviously climate change is something that will permeate throughout all aspects of our plan development, and also the second item there, which is in point 6, is that we'll be working in partnership with tangata whenua, and that there was a very clear directive that we were not looking to continue with the model that we have in the regional policy statement, whereby that tangata whenua chapter is quite separate to all others, in that we would be looking to weave through the tangata whenua perspective throughout the policy statement and the plan. So what Dale's done for you here is just highlight the issues that we captured from those workshops. We've got 1 through to 9 there. I'm happy to talk to each of those if you would like me to, but perhaps given that this is an information item, we can take this as read, and if there are any questions specifically, happy to take questions.
I've just got a quick question, Chair.
Yes.
Craig.
Go, Neil.
Who are you calling, Chair?
Kia ora, Neil.
Kia ora. Are you calling me?
Yes.
Sure, thank you. Kerry, I just wanted to head to issue 6, soils, erosion, urban encroachment. My first comment is that I had thought that probably our most significant issue, probably behind climate change, was sedimentation into our waterways, and I'm seeing issue 6 as essentially a catch-all for that. But 2 things: one, should sedimentation form its own issue on its own, and 2, separate it out from urban encroachment. I appreciate there are links, but because of the critical nature of sedimentation, ought we to describe that as probably our best, if you like, on the ground issue?
I think the way that the paper's been crafted, the issues aren't necessarily in any particular order. So by stating soil as issue 6 doesn't mean that it's any less important
an issue.
Yes. Take your point that sedimentation is a key significant issue for the region. I think this was intended to catch all, but the way that it's set out won't necessarily be the way that the regional policy statement deals with it. It's just really highlighting that we've heard what the issues are from you all, and just trying to capture all of the different aspects. So hence why they've been combined together.
Sure. All right. Well, that's good background information. I wonder, in that sense, then, are we better to make 10 issues and take urban encroachment out of that set, and in particular reference to the spatial plan, so that we were capturing, we are dedicating an issue, if you like, to 1, sedimentation, and 2, urban encroachment stroke spatial planning.
Yes, and I think that's probably a reasonable approach, and you'll see that further down in issue 7 that we talk about optimising land use, and that does refer to enabling growth, and there's obviously a very clear link in terms of our soil resource, so that we're not encroaching into the highly productive soil. So we could split that out differently.
Sure, just a comment. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Councillor Ormsby, then Councillor Williams, and then Councillor Foss after them.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kerry, I've got a few points, if you can just hang in there with me. I see that we've got the 9 main issues and about 36 sub-issues. And when I've sort of gone through each of those sub-issues, I mean, I just noticed that we've got about 12 that are environmental, 7 that work around the economic, and 6 around the social and cultural. So that was quite interesting to do the analysis of those 36, and I suppose asking myself, are we heavily more one way or not enough the other? So I mean, maybe that's something to consider when we're looking at the main issues, having some sort of descriptor within the 4 well-beings on what 4 well-beings we're addressing in each of those sub issues. But when we sort of take those and then we look at some of those issues, we have a duty of care to do something, which I liked, because that helps us understand what role we can play and how we can make a difference within those big issues, and whether or not it's within our mandate and scope as the regional council or the RPC with those planning and policy. So for half of those sub issues, you've got we have a duty of care. Is it worth that we have that starter for each of those sub issues? Because I don't really recall us talking about we have a duty of care in our workshop. We probably implied that. But should there be a duty of care descriptor for each of those sub issues, do you think?
Look, I think what the paper's trying to describe is a bit more of what our scope is and what our function is as a regional council, but bearing in mind that the regional policy statement is our duty of care. Those are the issues where we have highlighted that we have a responsibility. So given that this paper isn't necessarily how the regional policy statement will be framed in itself, it's just really indicating to you that this is what we've heard from you from the workshops. I mean, absolutely, we can change the paper, but bearing in mind that this isn't set in stone, this isn't concrete, this isn't what our regional policy statement will be formed. It won't mirror exactly what what's stated here. But I take your point. But yeah, just reflecting on the fact that the regional policy statement, the regionally significant issues are highlighting how we are proposing to manage our natural and built environment into the future, and the regional plan and the district plans must give effect to those to that regional policy statement.
Sorry, and just the last point, whether it was intentional or not on point 30, what's missing there is the first priority to Te Manawa Te Wai, to the health and well-being and body of water itself. So I'm not sure if that was just that we didn't talk about that in the workshop, or it was just missed in that note.
Probably missed in the note, and apologies, that's probably my fault there. I did quite a bit of redrafting of some of this, and apologies to Dale for doing that, because she was in the GECC. I possibly didn't address that specifically, but as you all know, Te Manawa Te Wai through the MPSFM is heavily interwoven into everything we touch in terms of fresh water. So whilst it's top of my mind, it's not reflected there in the paper. So my apologies.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Kerry.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, this is a really, I think, outstanding attempt to assemble the last two workshops together. I am interested in Councillor Curtin's comment about sediment being second and reflecting on David Attenborough's book, which would put biodiversity first, so even above climate change. And so rankings fraught. But I just want to ask this question: the focus of issue 1 all appears to be on climate change adaptation, and I think if we've got a duty of care, it is to the planet to be faithful to our strategic objective as a council to take the lead in ensuring that this region becomes net carbon zero by 2050. So I actually think spatial planning and kotahi, the issue is how do we design a region in terms of a blueprint, which means we can still live productive lives, but equally be contributing nothing in net terms to the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere. So I do think climate change mitigation is very much an absolute core issue. So I just wanted to ask whether the intention would be to ensure that's covered. And the other point is that 1/3 of our region is marine. Do we need to bring the marine biodiversity element of issue 3 more squarely into the fore in terms of our regional planning? Thank you.
I think Anna Matarazzo-Smith would absolutely agree with you on that. So there will be, look, as I said earlier, this is very much just trying to capture the discussions, not trying to place any greater weight on one thing over another. But take your point. We do need to focus more heavily on our coastal environment, and given that we are combining our plan now, we have the ability to do that. So I think that's a really positive opportunity through this regional policy statement, is to put a greater focus on our coastal environment, and biodiversity being one of those focuses too.
Sorry. Okay. Councillor Foss.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I had similar points to Councillor Curtin earlier, but you've answered those. But just on para 31, my recollection, you talk about extreme droughts and climate change, etc. by and large. Then right at the end of 31, you say, over the longer term, the overall water supply and demand balance may be significantly impacted. Given what you said prior, it actually already has been. And we refer to climate change in particular, but also I'm quite sure during the workshops we talked about, for example, the waste of about 20% of municipal water supply sucking away at the aquifer and basically going to waste. So is there, pretty much okay with what you got, but could you comment on that just a little bit further? Was that left out, dropped, or was I imagining that little part of the discussion? And if you could just expand on that last sentence to what you're trying to say there.
Sorry, I'm just rereading what's written.
For the listeners, much of Hawksbay is prone to drought and the demand for water exceeds supply, particularly on the Iratonga and Ruakanawa plains. Extremes of extended droughts and higher temperatures, together with more frequent intense rainfall events, are predicted to result from climate change. That should be result. Over the longer term, the overall water supply and demand balance may be significantly impacted. Basically, I thought we'd cross that bridge, and we've been searching for solutions because water insecurity is one of our high priorities.
It is, and I think what's intended there is that without doing anything, those impacts will be greater. I think that's what the intention is there of that sentence. So it's just recognizing the fact that those resources are definitely already under pressure, that our, acknowledging what you've just said, that we have already crossed that bridge. We've acknowledged that our Hiratonga aquifer is already over allocated, and we are, we run the risk of, if we don't make changes with those extreme droughts and higher temperatures, as stated in the paper, that that risk will, and those impacts will be far greater in the future.
Okay, I lost you for half that, but I'm sure you answered that very well.
Sorry, did I cut out?
Maybe I did. I don't know. I couldn't hear you for the last part, but I've made the point. If you just keep that in consideration, and appreciate what you're trying to do there. But yes, there's a large point of climate change in there, etc. But there's a lot of human intervention and constructs which are causing a lot of these supply versus demand issues. Thanks.
Sure, Craig. I've just been asked by Anna Lee, before we lose the quorum, because Api has to leave at 12:30, if we can confirm the previous items, which I think it's item 8, 10 and 11, because she was trying to get two of the members on during that time. But I think we did move those.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did move 8, 10 and 11. So Annalie, that if you're recording this, it will probably be on the recording.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep, thank you. All right. Do we have any further questions on the initial draft of regionally significant issues? Any further questions for Kieran?
I'm happy to move. We receive the report.
Kia ora, right. Can I have a seconder to that? Thank you. I'll second it. Kia ora, thank you, Kieran. Okay. Moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is item 12. We need verbal update.
Yeah, just to be helpful, could you just ask for those who support the resolution to wave a hand? And
oh, sorry.
I'm just being helpful with that.
Yep, thank you. Okay, for the to receive the initial draft of regionally significant issues, can I have a show of hands for those that support? Thank you.
I think that's a carry.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to the next item, which is item 12, verbal update on the central government reforms. Thank you. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, look, I'm going to collapse 12 and 13 together, the future of local government, as well as the government's reforms. I had a presentation which I gave the Māori committee recently, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to jump to the last slide in that and share that with you now. So hopefully you can see my screen, and you can everyone can see unprecedented wave of reform.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. So look, just to ensure we're all on the same page, because a lot of this will be not new to anyone, but clearly, as we've been discussing today, and as this committee has been working for a number of years now, fresh water is an enormous reform process in of itself. The limit setting across Te Mātua Māui comprehensively, every water body, and what we have to do with kotahi is a big undertaking for not only this committee and council, but also for the region as a whole. So we were already trucking along on that, and then last year the government made some amendments to the national policy statement to accelerate the time frame. No longer did we have until 2030, we now have until the end of 2024 to have notified those freshwater plan changes right across the region. And that obviously led to kotahi. So if that wasn't complicated enough, the government had an inquiry underway reviewing the Resource Management Act that reported at the end of last year, and the government has received that advice and signalled its intention to undertake legislative reform consistent with the recommendations of that review panel. Principally, that involves replacing the Resource Management Act with 3 acts of Parliament: the Natural Built Environments Act, the Strategic Planning Act, and Climate Change Adaptation Act. At this point in time, an exposure draft of the very front end, high level purpose and principles of the Natural and Built Environments Act has gone to Select Committee. That's the one that's currently being heard by Select Committee and the one that we're submitting on. Critical in that is introducing a new concept, Te Oranga o Te Taio, which is that all decisions made under this new legislation will not only need to give effect to the principles of Te Tiriti, but also to provide for Te Oranga o Te Taio. So some new concepts introduced into that, which builds on the Te Mana o Te Wai journey we've been undertaking in freshwater management. Critical for this committee to understand is the fact that that package of reforms to the Resource Management Act is premised on a different approach to the preparation of regional plans. So it is proposed that there be a regional spatial strategy developed, and that there be a combined regional plan, which would replace our current regional resource management plan and regional coastal environment plan and regional policy statement, all of which currently sit under the jurisdiction of this committee, and put that all together into one combined planning process. The initial indications are that government has an intention of creating joint committees for both the regional spatial strategy and for the combined plans that would involve representation from tangata whenua, from the local authorities involved, and from central government as well. In the spatial strategy, quite a heavy involvement from central government across their interests in things like housing, health, transport. In the combined plan, the idea would be just representation from the Minister of Conservation. What hasn't been clarified is how this committee and this council would feed into such a process. Who would service it? Would it be the regional council or other councils collectively? And what the representation from the territorial authorities looks like. So that's matters of detail that are highly significant to this committee's future functioning, all of which are on the table for further policy development and discussion. The government has signalled that those arrangements are being presently thought through, and that they will be introducing legislation next year that gives effect to those new arrangements. And I want to come back to all of that in a moment, but I just touch on a couple of other things that are obviously happening. So the Zero Carbon Act has been enacted and creates a need for the nation to reduce emissions and adapt to a new future. That is an ambitious piece of legislation with significant reform of the way we live, work, consume and produce embedded in it. And so that will have profound consequences for the future planning of this committee as well. Three Waters reform, so government currently consulting. I understand that members of our iwi Māori community across the region are meeting with Minister Mahuta by Zoom, I think this coming Monday. We had a recent collaboration day across the councils, of which a number of members, tangata whenua members of this committee, participated as well. So significant change proposed there, and some fairly intense discussions at the moment about the alternatives of a Hawksbay model and where Māori participation and governance and decision making sits in those reforms. Then on top of all of that, the government has initiated an inquiry into the future of local government, which is running through a process that will see an issues paper issued next month, and then some early indications of the future direction by April next year, and changes the following year after that. Again, that process involves some huge questions about the future role of this committee, the future of the regional council, and the role of tangata whenua generally, mana whenua in decision making in local government. So look, all of this is combining into just about the biggest perfect storm you've ever seen by way of reform to the work of this committee. Obviously has implications right across local government and in society more generally, but I particularly want to emphasise that for this committee that we've worked so hard to get up and running and has its own work program at the moment, all of this is quite confounding and presents significant opportunities for change, but obviously a lot of disruption as well. So the final thing I really wanted to say about all of that, and I will stop sharing now so we can all see one another, is that the government has indicated it is interested in undertaking a pilot around this whole new planning system. And they're looking for a region that might be willing to work through some of the detail of this as the policy is developed. And so that would be to develop a regional spatial strategy and a regional combined plan. And so they're looking for a region that has good relationships and commitments across a local government that would wish to collaborate, good relationships with tangata whenua in the region who also would see an opportunity to collaborate, and for us to work through what the role of this committee, what the role of
of the territorial authorities and for iwi Māori in the region, their role in decision making. So we've started this conversation amongst the chief executives and the mayors and chair of the council in the last few weeks about whether Hawksbay should consider putting its hand up as a pilot. We have some things that are really going for us. No other region has a regional planning committee like this one that is a genuinely co-governed committee involving all of the PSGs of the region, and that also has its own statutory basis. So we have a stronger institution in this committee than any other region to leverage off. We also have some really strong collaborations we've had in recent years around things like the Clifton to Tangoyo Coastal Hazard Strategy, the Hiritonga Plains Urban Development Strategy, the work that we've done around Three Waters and a regional model, including the cultural case that we've built there. And I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why Hawksbay could put forward a proposition to pilot this new approach. So I think the choice that we're confronted with is either we carry on in our merry way doing what we're doing with our current work program while all of these reforms happen around us and see what happens in the fullness of time, or whether we're willing to sort of lean into the reforms and take the opportunity to trial a new way of working that would essentially seek to bring our district plans, the planning of our cities and towns integrated into the work of this committee and the Regional Resource Management Plan, and create a more unified approach to all the issues the region faces, most urgently of which, of course, is climate change. But we've got major pressures, obviously, around natural hazards, fresh water, housing supply, and clearly the current planning system is not going to get us there. So the starting point for the reforms is that the planning system is incredibly cumbersome, incredibly slow, hasn't responded to the needs of housing demand, hasn't responded to the shortage of fresh water and the issues around freshwater deterioration, biodiversity, and certainly is not well positioned for the pace at which we need to work with climate change. So we're not asking for an answer today, although any initial indications or discussions would be useful. But what we would be proposing to do is work up what a Hawksbay bid for being a pilot might look like, discuss that with each PSG individually, and then also have a collective hui on this to see whether or not we're all up for trying something different. So there's obviously, with doing things different, some disruption and risk involved, but also there's risk in doing nothing as well on top of that. So that's currently what's happening at the national level. It's all very, very fluid, filled with risk, filled with opportunity, but clearly we're living in times of change. And this committee, I think, is really well positioned to be at the very bleeding edge of all of that. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, James, thank you for that. Apiara got a question for James. Kia ora.
Kia ora, yeah, I've got a couple of questions for you, James. So appreciating the fluidity of the space as it continues to evolve, and that we will look for opportunities to, I guess, extend our relationships to this new opportunity and how we might build a collaborative space as an ideal model for the rest of New Zealand, which is a big ask. Having said that, based on the conversations we've already had today, the indicators are good. So I've got a couple of questions for you. Is there any information that you can provide or the Crown can provide to distribute to PSGs and iwi groups to help us to become pre-informed and hit the ground quicker if we wanted to participate in this opportunity? Second question, is there any significant difference in our ability to achieve outcomes for our region by participating in this change, or is the difference if we remain on the path we're on? given that Hawksbay has already demonstrated across a number of environmental activities that there is good collaboration and partnership between, not perfect, but good collaboration and partnership between iwi and local authorities and regional authorities. So are we actually going to get a net gain out of this? The third question I have for you is around, the RPC has a statutory basis through the Ngāti Pāhauwera settlement. So would this also, by extension, mean new legislation around the formation of such committees nationwide? And would that legislation provision any extension to the current RPC legislation? So will we need to grow our definition as a result of this? And my fourth question is, if we're all able to stand around the fireplace and sing Kumbaya around this new opportunity, is there any investment from the Crown to enable iwi and authorities to step up their game in participation and engagement? Those 4 questions from me.
Thank you, Api. If I'd known you were going to ask 4, I would have taken notes, but I'll try to answer all of them. So perhaps working backwards. So look, the Ministry for the Environment was provided with significant funding in this year's budget, $131 million over 4 years to support the implementation of the reforms. Our understanding is that resourcing assistance with the pilot would be forthcoming. A particular priority for that would be supporting tangata whenua in capability and capacity and ability to engage. So I think that answers one of your questions in terms of what's in it for us. What are the benefits? I think there is some resourcing opportunity. I think related to your question around information, so there is a bunch of information about what has been contemplated by the review panel and the government's early thinking, but look, what I understand is that it's giving rise to some very fundamental issues around the Crown-Māori relationship and also around the future of local government and the role of local democracy in the resource management system. So there's quite a lot of open-ended questions about what the new arrangements could look like. And I think the emphasis that we'd want to place here is on the opportunity to shape future arrangements. And I think that goes to the fact that here we have an existing planning committee. We've got some experience of having our PSGs involved in regional planning in a collaborative model, which is not replicated in other parts of the country. We will have to, through these reforms, work through the existing RPC Act and those treaty commitments. And indeed, that's one of the complications for the Crown in reforming this whole area, is that right across the motu, there is existing treaty commitments which are resource management based. And so a really curly issue for the Crown is how do they navigate that? And I think we've got some not only track record, but we're in a prime position with this committee to not, I guess, just sit and have it worked out for us, but to shape how we think we can make the relationship between local government and tangata whenua in the region work effectively for regional planning. So that is, I guess, that's the real opportunity in all of this. And as I said at the outset, it wasn't without risk, but it is full of opportunity. And if we do nothing and the government remains on track, and this was obviously a top priority for the government upon being re-elected, there is going to be reform, and it is going to have a big impact on RMA planning and a big impact on this committee come what may. So I think that's that's what is worth us at least having a really good look at. I would expect that we would have some preconditions that we would have in negotiating with the Crown becoming a pilot region, and it would need to be on terms that worked for the region, not just for the Crown, quite obviously. Does that cover off?
Could I add to your answer?
10 out of 10 gold stars.
Can I add to your answer, please, Chair?
Kia ora. I was just going to give the floor to Councillor Foss and then you, Councillor Mahaka, if that's okay.
All right. I just think I want to come back and answer Api's questions as well.
I'm happy for Rick to jump in to maybe clarify, and they'll go after.
Can I just say to you, Api, the big question is, will this make things happen faster and better? And I would start from 2 points. Firstly, the IPCC report made a very clear statement about what's going to happen with climate change. What we are seeing now is simply a minor precursor of the rapid change which is going to follow from this. In my view, we have about 20 years maximum before we live in a completely different world. So we've got that, and we have, as leaders, responsibility to do our best to look after our area for our people, our children and grandchildren. The second point I make to you is on current settings, we aren't making much progress at all. You just have to look at, we're in the Environment Court on Plan Change 6 and so on. We just aren't resolving issues in the way that we need to. And I want to then look to what we've done in the FMU space. I just think we've stepped back and said, well, let's have a look at this. And I'm really pleased with the progress we've made on that. And I think that is generally a model where I think we can find a way to get things done better, quicker, and differently. And I would imagine that if we're going to build on the collaboration, it's not just at the level of the regional council with its PSGE people working together. We're going to have to pull in the TAs, we're going to pull in other groups, and we're going to identify a vision of where we're going for the future and then work for that. We have to solve problems more quickly, find answers more quickly, and we need to get things done more quickly because time is ticking away. The current arrangement is simply not working.
Kia ora, Councillor Barker. Councillor Foss and then Councillor Foley. Councillor Foss, are you still there? No. Go, Councillor Foley.
Thanks, Chair. Kia ora, everyone. Yeah, I was really just going to kind of back up Rick, but and just to say, if you refer back to the significant issues paper, things like climate change isn't new, things like our water security, and particularly the gap between supply and demand, and that's only going to get worse as population increases. But the frustrating thing is that none of that is new. In the last 10 years, what have we achieved in terms of water security? And so I kind of agree with Rick, is we just actually need to work out if to do the same thing, we're not going to achieve anything. So we are going to need to do things differently. Cheers.
I'll take that Councillor Foss's back, and then I'll take you, Liz, after Councillor Foss, if that's okay.
Thank you. I just may drop out again, much to your pleasure, but sorry if I just missed what Will said. But all very exciting, James. Thanks very much. And no doubt such a fundamental discussion would come up to the full council for consideration as well. But the time frame under which these decisions need to be made, I wasn't sure from what you'd said. And also as I think Will might have just been saying, we have so much on our plate now which is actually not progressing or struggling to progress, the various plan changes, etc., for whatever reason. And we're told of the stresses and strains of your leadership team and all our internal resources. So could you just kind of give us an assurance that those issues are considered as we perhaps are guinea pigs in a bit of a policy shop here, which actually sounds great for Hawksbay and taking a leadership role and being in the tent and all those things sounds great, but there's always a cost and there's no free lunch here. And yes, we might get some tin thrown at us to help us through it, but no one can make the clock longer or hire us a bunch of new staff, which we need to be doing on Plan Change 6, the various consenting, water storage problems, etc., etc. So I wonder if you just please comment on that a bit further. Thanks, James.
So in terms of the time frame, at the moment, we've only heard informally from the Ministry for the Environment that they will be commencing an expression of interest phase later this month. Remains to be seen whether that timetable is adhered to and how long expressions of interest are out for. They have been informally indicating an interest in undertaking a pilot for some time. So we were aware that this opportunity was likely to arise. Look, my understanding is an expression of interest phase wouldn't commit us. It would start us down a track of working through the detail of a proposition with the government that we could obviously bring back before final decisions and commitments are made. That will give us an opportunity to understand some of the resourcing challenges in all of this. I think the resourcing issues at one level shouldn't be underestimated, but our thinking to date is that we're going to expend an awful lot of resource on kotahi, pretty much around the engagement with our communities, particularly mana whenua, but our communities more generally. And if we're doing it once, we want to do it right. And we do, as you know, have a number of planning instruments in play, a number of which are getting bogged down. So I think our sense is that if we are to make progress across the full range of planning work the council's doing it differently and doing it smarter may be a better way to go. And that may actually be a more efficient use of our resources ultimately. And this would be a collaboration with the territorial authorities. So the strength they have in their planning teams would be brought into this exercise. So the working assumption is that we wouldn't be on our own. There would also be funding, as I said, coming from MFN, as you noted, that would enable us to build some even greater capability. So look, at one level, I'm not even sure that we have too many options other than to try this, other than to stick with the status quo, which is in of itself inefficient, resource hungry, and very difficult to make progress on. So yeah, we have to work through the practical implications of that and bring that all back, as you say, to full council for consideration.
James, Liz.
Look, thanks for that, James. In an effort to give our PSGEs as much lead time as possible, any chance of a one-pager that summarises all of that I can put to our board, it meets on the 21st this month, to just signal that this is coming, and then get a lead, get an initial reaction to that. I think one of the worries for us, for the Heretaunga Tamatea that came from the Natural and Built Environment Bill, is that the Regional Planning Committee will get played around without us having input other than through the submission process. So, we've got our council, Chris Finnison, I'll just let you know, doing our submission on that. But if there's an opportunity, and this looks as though it's a way for us to do that, for the PSGEs to get in there and renegotiate, or whatever that looks like, the Regional Planning Committee, I think we should at least be open to looking at it. And so I think it's a great initiative. And thank you. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind a one-pager to save thinking, and we get it accurate, be great.
Absolutely, we can. And so we'll get something worked up and get it circulated. And I know that Rick's keen to speak with each of the PSGs individually as well, as we work up this concept. But it's early days. This is just moving quickly. It was only last Thursday or Friday that I heard about this time frame for an expression of interest. So we're I guess trying to ensure that we've brought you into the loop as soon as possible, and that this is a collaborative conversation before we go to the Crown.
That's great.
And just to add to that, Liz, expect a request for an opportunity for me to come to your PSGE. I'd like James to be there if we can get him there, Perry, and I'd also like to do so on the basis of having talked again more carefully to the Regions 4 mayors, so they know what we're doing. So we're trying to get a clearly established regional basis for this. It's all making it, pulling it together as we go. But I think we have an obligation as leaders to try and do our best to make this thing work as fast and as effectively as we can for our communities.
Look, I endorse that. Thank you. And I just, in terms of the local authorities and the regional council coming together, I'd just like to ask that and I accept that that discussion needs to happen to get a kind of position. But let's not give us the feeling, the PSGs, that we're a tag on or a clip on after that. If somehow we're in the mix equally as the, and I know legislation probably doesn't require this at the moment, but in the spirit of good faith and going forward, if we're in there as an equal.
Can I just say to you, to use a footy analogy, you're in the front row.
That. Could you try again?
Okay. Did I go on mute there or something? Yeah.
Just tell you, Liz, I see that the PSGEs will be in the front row of the scrum.
Thank you. Cool.
We are not going to achieve what we need if people feel they're out of the conversation. This needs a full team, full court pressed by everybody. There's no easy way out of this. We all have to share a vision of what needs to be done, all be committed and give this our best. We ain't going to do the job without that.
Yeah. I just want to nudge us a little closer to that partnership position. But thank you. I thank you. I look forward to the paper, James.
Kia ora RPC tangata whenua. I'll be in touch with each of you to initialise that discussion with Rick, with James.
Thank you.
Since there's no further questions of James, thank you very much for that very informative and short and pulled together update, James. Well done. Some challenges ahead for us all, but then that's what we're here for. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. So I'm just wondering whether if there's no further whānui or questions anyone wants to ask or anything, that Pierre offer us a karakia to close our hui, please.
Kia ora tātou. It's a very short one, and I'll translate it so that we can participate. Ka ura te rā ki tōna kōmata, ka pari te tai ki tōna pukea. Ko te puawai ka puawaihia he kākara tai āwhio, ko haina ki te ao, tihei mauri ora. As the sun achieves its zenith, and as the oceans their tidal grasp of the whenua, and as the seed, the bud, blossoms into full bloom, thence are our senses enlivened to gifts unsurpassed, bequeathed to all of us. There is life. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, everybody.